Oh, good afternoon and welcome to the Natural Resources, Agriculture and Open Space Subcommittee. I am Delegate Regina T. Boyce, your chair, and we will be going through two bills today. Delegate Polakovich-Carr's bill, HB 188, Natural Resources Wildlife Advisory Commission membership, and Delegate Foley's bill, HB 90, Local Government Regulatory Powers, Controlling of Running Bamboo. We're going to take HB 188 first. Patrick?
Yes, ma'am.
Ready to go?
Yep. As you all know, we had the hearing last week. This bill requires the governor to appoint to the Wildlife Advisory Commission a member who is an academic researcher with expertise in wildlife biology, wildlife conservation, management, or ecology, and also adds to an existing requirement to have farming representation by requiring representation from hunting and fishing communities, wildlife preservation community, and passive wildlife community, which is walking, bird watching, things like that.
And I wanted to open up the floor to see if anyone had any clarifying questions, any questions about the individual member that is mentioned here, Delegate Jacobs. Delegate Jacobs, your hand is raised. Go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Thank you. I must have been live, and I clicked.
It's okay.
Anyhow, I see an amendment here which is striking out for fishing communities. I guess that's or hunting and fishing. I guess it's striking. Is that correct, Patrick?
No, I believe it's just striking fishing.
And it's adding communities?
Well, the bill is adding communities. The amendment strikes fishing from the hunting and fishing communities.
Yeah, well, I'm opposed to that. And I'm opposed to the bill in general because it's really taken away from sportsmen representation. So done with.
Delegate Jacobs, you don't think there's enough sportsman representation on the bill?
I do not. Right. And they're adding more representatives that are not sportsmen, and they're taking the sportsmen from the fishing communities off, which I'm opposed to.
Okay, can you clarify for us for the committee the need for these individuals and what they contribute to this advisory commission?
Well, I think wildlife advisory should be exactly that. Wildlife advisory, that should be the sporting groups that are certainly involved with the wildlife. There's a long line of possibilities with this wildlife biology, wildlife conservation, wildlife management, or ecology. That's a long line of possibilities, none of which are, in my opinion, involved in the sportsman side of it.
Okay.
So it will throw out of balance, in my opinion, the makeup of the advisory. And I'm definitely opposed to taking out fishing, as you might have imagined.
Okay, I think I have the wrong copy in front of me. In the meantime, let's go to Delegate Terrassa.
Yeah, my understanding from the advocates is that the hunters requested this amendment. Just adding that to the discussion.
Delegate Jacobs.
The amendment to take out fishing.
Yes. Delegate Jacobs, do you, while you object to that, do you know that that is what's happened?
I don't see that in any of my testimony. I see that it was favorable by the Humane Society, the Maryland State Bar Animal Law section, but I don't see anything from the hunters in my testimony.
There is testimony from the hunters of Maryland, Bill Miles, and they did ask for the fishing to be taken out.
All right. Well, I stand corrected on that motion.
Oh, okay.
I still don't change my position.
Okay, so I guess I can ask a further question, then I'll move on to Delegate Terrassa if she still has. Okay, then I'll move on to Delegate Ruth. Is quote unquote hunting and fishing communities not encompassing enough? Delegate Jacobs? You're on mute, buddy.
Say that again. I was looking on the.
So
I was
when it
looking up
says,
something.
yes, when it says the hunting or fishing communities, you don't believe communities encompasses the sport?
Well, I don't want to see fishing communities taken out, first of all. And, you know, the addition of these members are not from the hunting and fishing and sportsmen's communities. It's a long list of possibilities that would definitely change the makeup of the committee. Getting away from that sports advisory, wildlife advisory, in my opinion. But I'm trying to look up the testimony from the hunters.
I think I may have the wrong print of the bill. I see the hunting or fishing communities, unless I missed.
Well, the amendment from the sponsor took out fishing.
Okay, I just have I don't have the most updated copy, that's all. That's okay. Delegate Ruth?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And the amendment, I believe the sponsor sent that out by email today, but the amendment. And my understanding is that the fishing was taken out because there are 2 dedicated commissions already for fishing. And Patrick, I wondered, can you address that? Do you know that?
That's what the hunting testimony said, yes. The Tidal Fisheries Advisory Committee and the Sport Fishing Advisory Committee. That's what they were referring to.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussions about this particular bill and the makeup of this commission? Yes, Delegate Jacobs.
All right, Patrick, I'm looking at my testimony. I don't see anything from the Maryland Hunters.
I can respond to that, Chairwoman.
Yes.
I believe it was uploaded, I'm not sure why, but in Jennifer Bevan Dingle's name, maybe?
I don't.
Which is odd, but.
Yeah, I don't have any reprints or an amendment in my.
To my knowledge, there's no reprint, just the amendment that was sent out today.
Okay, I guess I don't have the amendment for whatever reason.
The
Yeah,
the testimony has a heading of Hunters of Maryland with the big deer, and this as a centerpiece, dated February 8th.
And Delegate Taras is correct. It was uploaded in the system under Jennifer Bevan Dangle. I think it was the second one listed if someone's using their floor system.
I see it now.
Madam Chair, the amendment was sent by email at 11:46 a.m. today from Delegate Palekovich Carr.
Okay, I will ask my legislative director to make sure I have that because I definitely don't see it. And I made sure I printed out everything. So I do apologize for this. Are there any other questions, and do folks feel comfortable moving this bill forward?
I'd move unfavorable myself.
And do you want to consider the amendments?
Yes.
Is it appropriate to make a motion on the amendments at this point, Madam Chair?
Yes, Delegate.
Thank
Would
you.
you want me
I
to
move.
describe what the amendments do?
I'm sorry, what was that, Patrick?
Would you want me to describe what the amendments do?
Yes, sir.
Okay. The first amendment increases the number of people on the commission from 9 to 10. This was also suggested by the hunters for the reason that traditionally the chairman does not vote, and usually you want 9 voting members or an uneven amount of voting members on the commission. Then, as Delegate Jacobs says, it takes out fishing communities as people in fishing communities as eligible for being on the board. And then for the most of the rest of it, it's just changing the, updating the rolling membership. It's not a particularly substantive amendment.
Right. Right, it's 2 consecutive 4-year terms, correct, or something like that?
Right, and they're staggered, and
Right.
they were staggered as of 1989 or
Yep, I saw that.
87 to 89, and they're just increasing and altering the years from 2003 to 2005.
Okay. And I also want to just be clear for myself and the committee that fishing communities was removed because there are other commissions on fishing.
Correct. Advisory commissions on fishing.
Advisories, yes. Thank you, Patrick. Have a motion to move the amendments.
Move the amendments.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of the amendment, say aye.
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 Opposed?
Opposed.
Delegates on your opposed?
I'm opposed, yeah.
Otto's opposed?
I'm opposed. to it.
Jacob's opposed. Thank you. Is there a motion to move the bill as amended?
Move the bill favorable.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any other discussion? All in favor of the bill as amended, say aye.
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 Opposed?
No,
Opposed.
Are you also opposed, Delegate Stein?
No, I'm voting favor.
Thank you.
What's amended.
Okay.
Madam Chair, I believe Delegate Baker was trying to figure out how to put his hand up. I
Oh,
think.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, I missed that.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, I oppose.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bill passes. We will move on to HB 90, Delegate Foley's bill, and we'll have Kristen step in and talk a little bit about that.
So this bill is House Bill 90, which is enabling, it's authorizing counties to adopt ordinances related to the upkeep and containment of running bamboo. And the sponsor did submit amendments, and those amendments would extend this authority to municipalities. And instead of referring to running bamboo, running they strike running and replace it with invasive. So it's referring to regulating invasive bamboo.
Any questions about invasive bamboo, Delegate Tarasa?
Yeah, I'm curious about that. I thought that there were two types of bamboo and then either of those types could be invasive. In other words, I didn't think invasive was the same thing as running. I thought it was like covered either running or the other type. Unfortunately, I can't remember the other type.
Right. The definition in the bill refers to bamboo that is characterized by aggressive spreading behavior.
Mhm.
So when it's referring to invasive bamboo, that is the defined term, is that it still keeps to that the spreading. I can't remember, was it bundled was the other one when it doesn't spread? I have to look.
Yeah,
back at my notes.
yeah, they use the word bundled.
I'm thinking,
Can I just follow up?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I guess I don't know if, I don't remember the other name, and if you just said that, I apologize for missing it, but the other type, but I don't know how somebody knows. I literally just don't know. Like, it's probably obvious to somebody, but how you know it's invasive when it's just getting started? Like, you know it's invasive when it's starting to cause a problem, right? Or is that a
But
type?
the species was, the type was invasive. And so I think the fiscal note talks about it. It's called, don't ask me to say it. It's like Philostaceus. Oh gosh.
Okay, well, yeah, okay, you can try, but I got
Yeah.
you now. But so
Yeah,
this
so
takes the word Philostaceus, and then I don't understand why we're substituting invasive for running. I think I'm on the board with the whole concept and supportive of it, but I just don't understand this particular amendment.
I think it's, to me, and Kristen can tell me if I'm wrong, it makes a technical change. We can call it running maybe, out in the general world, but I think legislatively running doesn't work in legislation. So
Okay,
it's just debate because it is invasive, and because it's invasive, it spreads. And so
I didn't receive a full explanation, but it didn't change the overall definition, I guess, is what's happening here. And I understand your question, but substantively, the language would have the same effect because the definition of the bamboo remains the same. So
Okay.
I'm not sure it's really doing anything either way.
Okay, thanks.
yes, Delegate Ruth and then Delegate Stein.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. And I don't want to slow up
No problem.
the progress of this bill, but I did want to raise the issue that came up at the hearing, which is, can we prevent it from being sold, which seems to me a better solution than expecting homeowners to be able to recognize which type of bamboo they have and, and penalizing. I mean, we need to stop this. Clearly, it's a problem, but it just seems to me it's better to just say, let's not sell it.
So I think that there was a bill a couple of years ago on the Senate side, and that would bring it under the Department of Agriculture. They have the invasive plant advisory committee that lists plants as tier 1, and tier 1 plants would be the plants that would be, you can't sell it, you can't grow it. There's also a level tier 2, which those plants can be sold in the state, and that just has signage requirements, which currently a couple species of bamboo or come under that tier 2 listing. And I looked at we didn't have it on the House side, but I did look back at the testimony on the Senate bill, and it seemed that the idea of the legislature telling the advisory committee which plants to list as tier 1 seemed to be kind of the issue. I'm not sure if that was the overall issue. I don't know why, what happened with that bill. But if in order to address bamboo in the way Delegate Ruth, proposed, it would need to, I think the more appropriate place would be under the current invasive plant species listing law.
Do you mean the tier 1 then, or you mean something different?
Well, if the idea was to, you could create another law, but right now the process in this state is that there's a process for reviewing, classifying, and if it was the will of the body to say you need to also classify bamboo as a tier 1, that is one way to regulate it, but I'm just not sure. I think that was, there's a couple of years ago that was proposed. I'm not really sure what the issue was.
Right.
Why that,
Madam Chair,
I'm not sure if Department of Ag is, willing to weigh in on it. I'm not sure what the issues were, but I did see that bill introduced a couple of years ago.
Madam Chair, can I follow up?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And so I did look up that bill as well. I asked Delegate Foley about it, and it was SB 491 in 2020. And, I did actually look at the testimony from the Maryland Invasive Plant Advisory Council, and it says they're not so concerned over the addition to the invasive plant list, but that it requests that it is referred to IPAC for its review through the processes that have been put in place in the Maryland Register. So I'm not sure what's involved in referring that to them for review.
Yeah, and just one thing to clarify, I think I remember from the hearing is that if planted in a certain way, you could keep it from being invasive, kind of like mint, right? We tend to plant mint in a pot and then we plant it to keep it from spreading. So it sounded like there was somewhat questionable about whether or not we should ban it, because to a degree it can be managed. But I do take your point into consideration, Delegate Ruth, in that if it's so invasive, I'm not sure why we don't ban it. Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. During the bill hearing, the sponsor said that she intended this to apply only to those who planted the bamboo, not to a homeowner who inherits a situation where you've got running bamboo. And I guess my question is, do we need to clarify the bill on that point?
Clarify whether it's doesn't penalize those from the past who may have had it and didn't plant it per se.
Right, or
Yeah, that's not the bill. The bill would apply to, it says that the ordinance could prohibit a person from allowing invasive bamboo to grow on the property without proper upkeep. There's no mention of, that about who planted the bamboo. So any property owner, wouldn't be allowed to have this, they wouldn't allow it to grow and or to spread from the property. So it just applies to a person, and it doesn't say really about the origin of the bamboo.
right, and I thought that her intent was it applies only if someone had planted it, but not if they inherited a situation.
Okay, so we need to check with the sponsor about intent.
Yeah, I do recall that being brought up, and I guess language would be, prohibit a person from planting invasive bamboo instead of allowing it to grow, because that implies if it's on your property and you're not doing anything about it, maybe you could be penalized because you were allowing it once it starts. Maybe it was a smaller planting before, and now it's starting to spread, and you didn't plant it, but now you would be responsible for it. I believe, under the way the bill is drafted.
And Kristen, just to be clear, and then we'll go to Delegate Otto. If we do change it to quote unquote banning, then this is not necessarily enabling legislation anymore, per se.
So, well, it is still enabling. Nothing has been proposed. It would be still authorizing the local government to decide to do that, but maybe that wording would be
Giving them the option to ban it if they want.
Yeah, and maybe that's why it was worded. Maybe it was deliberately worded this way, but it does make it a little open on how it would be applied.
Okay, Delegate Otto.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Kristen, you just hit on how's it going to be enforced? So it's the local governments that are going to end up having to deal with this?
That's correct.
That's
And
correct.
it's enabling. So the local government can, elect to adopt an ordinance. This bill doesn't require them to do that, but the local government who adopts the ordinance would then be responsible for enforcing their law.
It is an issue. Don't get me wrong. I see it in my neighborhood, but we have people that use this bamboo for fishing poles. I've seen them use it and go and catch their meal. And I've seen it. How are we going to feed the panda bears?
I think there's another variety that is versus bundling versus an invasive that I think they do. Oh my goodness, Delegate Jacobs.
Oh, I think this is a slippery slope, and I understand how bamboo grows, but the enforcement from a county government on somebody's personal property, I think if I remember in the hearing, they were talking about you're going to determine how long it's been there by the size of it and all this and that. I think it's just opening up Pandora's box. And, I just think it infringes without a law banning it on personal property rights. The next thing you want to do is tell people how to trim their trees. And I think it's just setting a dangerous precedent.
Fair enough, sir. Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And just following up, I think that we could keep the bill as authorizing local governments, and that leaves it up to the local government to decide whether in their locality they want to be able to restrict homeowners from being able to do this. But I guess my question is just, could we add an amendment to that to refer it to the IPAC? And I just don't know what's involved, but their testimony said that there's a way to refer it to them to consider it as a tier 1 plant. I mean, their note from 2020, sorry.
I'm sorry, you said consider it as a tier 1 versus a tier 2?
Right. So the 2020 bill, I think, had been adding it to the tier 1 list. And then the Invasive Plant Advisory Committee, their testimony said that a more appropriate way from their perspective of doing it would be to refer it to them being the Invasive Plant Advisory Council, for its review through its processes to consider it for the invasive plant list. And I just wondered if we could add that, whatever that's involved, if we could consider an amendment to add that referral to IPAC, but keeping the rest of the bill intact in terms of authorizing local governments.
I have a follow-up, but go ahead, Delegate Terrassa, and then Delegate Ziegler. You're on mute, friend.
I am, sorry. Thank you. So, like, if I'm following this, I understand Delegate Ruth's suggestion, and I think it's a good one, but are we not able to add to this bill a ban on the sale of it? I'm just worried, like, I just Googled bamboo and types of bamboo, and there's like 13 types of bamboo, and I just worry a little bit about it still being for sale. I mean, I know that's what we're discussing, but I'm wondering if we are able to add it to this bill, or if that's not really a possibility, if we wanted to go that way.
Well, I wonder if in this enabling legislation, we can authorize a local jurisdiction to ban if they feel necessary. Like
right. Sorry, yes.
Yeah, does that make better sense? Rather than ban it, because maybe some folks, to I think Delegate Jacobs' point, is not a problem. It's not a big deal. Like, they may not care as much, but for somewhere else where, somebody thought it'd be a good idea to plant, it's all over the place. They decide that they're going to ban the sale of it. They would have that decision to make. We wouldn't be able to make it for themselves, or make it something arbitrary that may not be needed.
Yeah, I think that makes sense to me.
Okay, Delegate Ziegler and then Delegate Ruth.
So something Delegate Jacobs said made me wonder if, in fact, there aren't already laws on the books which would prevent you from being able to do damage to property next to you, however that happened. But because it's enabling legislation, I don't have a big problem with it. I do agree with you. Why not also allow a municipality or county to ban it if they wanted to? But as I say, if you damage somebody else's property, I think you've already got the law on your side.
Yeah. Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry to have so many.
No, this is the process.
So, I think when we're talking about the land use and, how local governments want to address homeowners planting it, I think it makes sense to authorize local governments. But I think when you're talking about banning the sale, that's better done at the state level, because otherwise, aren't we going to have a hodgepodge of, you can sell it here, but you can't sell it in Gaithersburg, but you can sell it in Rockville. And then, which I think would make it very complicated for retailers or wholesalers or whatever.
Delegate Terrassa and then Delegate Baker.
It's funny, I was saying you were on mute, but I was on mute. I do agree with Delegate Ruth, but I guess back to my question that I was asking, is that something we can add to this bill? Like, are we able to do that? I really am concerned about people going to the store. People like me, I could see going to the store and saying, well, I bought the kind that they sell. Like, I assume that's okay, right?
Right.
So it kind of it worries me not to do the two in conjunction with each other, but I do think it's a big issue. And I'm sorry.
Go ahead. Sorry.
And just to Delegate Ziegler's point, I don't know if there are laws on the books, but I'll tell you, as a council member, we dealt with bamboo several times and there was no recourse that we knew of. And maybe it's just because it's private right of action, I don't know, but there was no recourse on that. We had other issues with like trees that leaned over other people's yards and they could fall over onto other people's yards, but there was no course of action for that either. There's a whole line of case law, but Kristen probably knows a lot more about them than I do. I don't know, but I
don't
just
know.
say that it's
I
not
really don't.
necessary. Yeah, we weren't able to deal with that on a number of occasions that were problematic for our constituents.
Okay. Anyone else? Yes, Delegate Baker and then Delegate Stein.
You're going to forget about me.
I'm not gonna forget about you. I didn't see your hand up, but I did
know.
see you waving. I got you.
Okay, so anyhow, wouldn't the local governments have the ability to provide a policy or an ordinance to control the running bamboo?
Right, which is what this bill does. It would authorize the local jurisdiction counties.
I understand that, but wouldn't they also have the right to submit a bill such as this
Right.
as a municipality or a county government?
Right. The same question I wondered too, if I would think they would already have the authority through their police powers. I have not talked to anybody from Mako, but there's nothing in state law that I'm aware of where a local jurisdiction would be preempted from adopting this. But I mean, I could definitely reach out to make sure I have that. But that was my initial thought is, could they do this anyway?
Right.
Yes, so that was my thought. And if so, I would be all about letting the municipalities and the county government set their own policies on running bamboo. Also, if it does move to my property, don't I have a right to dig it up and get rid of it?
If it's on your property, sure, but I think the issue is that that's not going to be enough because in the next couple of months, weeks, years, it's going to be back. And I think that's the bigger issue is that it is all consuming. Delegate Jacobs.
Thank you. I don't think this bill is needed for local government to do their own legislation on this process personally. I know from my days of being mayor, if I wanted to pass this legislation, I could have done so. So I don't think this is necessary. And I'm very concerned with parts of the bill with how they're going to establish when it's grown too big and, who's making the decision. I just think it's too many moving parts in here, very confusing. And also, if you want to ban this, I think that's another bill. I don't think it's this vehicle. And getting back to limbs hanging over a fence, my understanding is forever, anything that hangs on your side of the property line, you can do anything you want with. You can have a tree trimmer come in there and cut that tree right straight up in the air on the fence. That's been my experience in local government. So I think law does exist on where it crosses the line. And I just don't think this bill is a vehicle to do what they're trying to do. I think it already exists in local government.
Thank you, Delegate Jacobs. Delegate Stein.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just on apropos Delegate Ruth's comment on the sale, authorizing locals to ban the sale of bamboo. I guess I had a question for Kristen. Typically, when the legislature has banned something agricultural or natural resources, has it been on a statewide basis, or have we given authorization to local government to do that? Does strike me that maybe a statewide effort might be better, but
I would say most proposals I've seen, I would say, have been at the state level. Whether we've done, there's nothing that comes to mind. I can certainly look into it, but this type. Well, but this, I think typically it's you would see this at the state level.
Okay, thank you.
Delegate Ziegler.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So Howard County does have a noxious weed law for farms. You are required to spray shattercane, Canada thistle. There are a number of Johnson grass. There are a number of naturally occurring invasive species that we are required to spray. So I guess we must have the ability to pass that law, right?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the local law. I know there are state laws regarding noxious weeds and the control of those on ag land. I'm not familiar, but even with that, I would think, certainly if any weed, I'm sure a local jurisdiction would have the ability to establish laws. I just don't know what each jurisdiction is doing. I'm not familiar. But that's a good point.
Thank you.
Delegate Tarasa, Delegate Ruth.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to Delegate, wait, who was saying that? I forget who was just saying. Oh, Delegate Jacobs was saying about, yeah, you can cut off what crosses the fence line. I agree with that. The issue we've had with trees, just really quickly, is that they could be leaning all the way over, but you can only cut off what, in fact, we come back to our neighbors' trees. You can only cut off what goes to your land. But in terms of bamboo, I've heard this before and I just kind of looked it up. I think the issue is that it sprouts from the ground. It doesn't come over the fence. So in fact, the one source I'm looking at now says you have to basically block it out with, like, it's very difficult. Like, you have to create a barrier 2 feet deep and the clump and insert 24 inch wide aluminum flashing. And then if you're off, like if it's already jumped that area, you have to do it again and again. So it's a very expensive process. Also, if the subcommittee is leaning towards saying, well, it's already allowed under for the counties to pass this themselves, I wonder if we could get legal advice, unless Kristen feels like she's knows that for sure. But
I would definitely follow up, because
yeah.
it's just it seems that could be true, but I'm not 100% certain. And so I'm happy to follow up on that.
Yeah, I think if we're leaning against it, I think it's a really important bill, so I could support it the way it is with the amendments. But if we're leaning towards the thought that it's possible, anyway, I would like to get clear advice on that.
Sure, will do. Delegate Ruth. You're on mute.
Sorry, I couldn't it wouldn't click. Thank you, Madam Chair. It seems like we have a lot of questions, so I wanted to ask if we could hold this bill a week.
We're definitely going to hold this bill. Wasn't planning on moving it, but I do have a clarification question once you're finished, Delegate Ruth.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that as part of the research, and I don't know if it's something Kristen should do or we should ask the bill sponsor to do, if we could reach out to this Invasive Plant Advisory Council and find out what would be required to refer it to them, as they had said in 2020.
That could be maybe just even through uncodified language and a directive to the committee, but that's housed with the Department of Ag, and I can follow up with that Department of Ag on that.
I do need clarification, because is this the same Invasive Plants Advisory Committee you're talking about?
Yes.
So they already so we want to ask them to classify or essentially declassify this particular species of bamboo.
I'm not sure what Delegate Ruth is proposing, but if you wanted them to review it in any capacity, we'd have to think about that language of what the goal is. Is the goal for them to review and decide whether it should be on there, or is there the goal to require them to list it?
But I guess I'm not quite clear, because they have it established as a tier 1 or tier 2 plant currently, and so
they have 2 plants currently. Yes, currently, yes. And that's they do currently. But whatever if the will of the subcommittee was to require them to list it, that's just language you have to draft. What that language would look like, we'd have to to
Right.
think about
'Cause
it,
they have
but
it classified as a tier 2.
there are two types that are currently classified as tier 2 in Maryland.
Yes. 3.
3.
Right, but tier 1, I think, allows it to be banned,
Right.
if I understand right. So if they would reclassify it as tier 1, then that would effectively ban sale of it, if I'm understanding right.
Right. Yes. Okay. Yeah. I have this highlighted. So we want it to be potentially reclassified, is what I'm hearing, as tier 1, as essentially a plant that causes harm within the state. Yeah, I'm wondering if there's a potential study to do that, because I don't know, for the people who've planted this, it kind of stinks that this is something they have to deal with. So we definitely have more questions and answers, and we will gather those. I'll work with Kristen and see if we can come up with some more clarifying information, and then we can hopefully decide what we do next as it relates to this. And so the other, I think, big question in the room, I think I've heard, is the question of whether or not this bill is even needed as it is, and would local jurisdictions, counties, and municipalities put in something like this on their own if a state bill did not exist. And I know that's a question. I just wonder if, respectfully, it sounds like to me, it even if it passed as is now, a local jurisdiction could do nothing. They could still do nothing. It just says that they could if they decided to. So, any other thoughts or questions? Okay. Well, that was our only 2 bills for today. We had to hold another bill. As you know, most bills that have a fiscal note over $100,000 has to be cleared through appropriation. So some of those will be held in the interim, and as bills are coming out, we'll get them on the list so we can get them in and appropriately vet them. Where we can move it, we'll move it. And if we've got to take a lot longer to go through certain bills, we certainly will. So thank you, everyone, for your input today. Any last words before we depart? No? Well, thank you. That concludes our subcommittee, and we'll see you guys next week.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, guys.